Welcome back to the Dads to the Future podcast, the podcast where we explore the triumphs, challenges, and unforgettable moments of fatherhood. I'm your host, Vactor, and today we're thrilled to welcome a very special guest, Super Tim. Tim is no stranger to my other shows, having shared his insights on Trust in the Force, my Star Wars show, as well as This Comic Cooks, my comic book show. He's got a Bachelor of Arts in English Creative Writing from Weber State and a passion for storytelling. Tim, he brings a unique perspective to every conversation. But this episode isn't just about creativity, it's about family. As a father of two autistic children, Tim is here to share his journey, shedding light on the joys, challenges, and invaluable lessons of raising kids with autism. Tim is going to be sharing some of his insights and challenges, as well as telling us about what fatherhood looks like through his unique lens. Super Tim, welcome to Dads to the Future, my friend.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, I am very happy to speak to you on this level because you and I, we usually talk about a lot of pop culture things, Star Wars, comic books, things of that nature. But we don't talk as much about family. And I'm very interested to get your unique perspective as someone who has two autistic children, and your day to day dad life is very different from my day to day. So I wanted to get
hmm
some insights into that. But first, I wanted to ask you a question. What does fatherhood mean to you personally, Tim?
Personally, it means a great deal to me. Because I I didn't start having kids till I was like in my 30s, and so having watched a lot of people interact with their children, I got to see, okay, this is what I want to do. And usually, as fathers, as dads, we could all relate to that. We're watching, like, not only people, but we're watching television, we're watching movies, and like you mentioned, we do look at those things with that lens, like, just thinking about comics, looking at Superman as a dad, not just to his own kids, but to all the kids. I mean, David Cornsmith, who's playing Superman, is, he wanted the red trunks because will kids see me as non-threatening? And so we're looking at these things through these lens. And fatherhood means a great deal to me. A lot of the things I do in my life, I attribute to my children, and wanting them to see that, because prior to having kids, I was in college, but I really didn't have a direction. I really didn't have kind of a focus that I was aiming for. But then when I started having kids, I started looking at things like, yeah, I could go to college and do all these things and take all these cool classes, but if I'm not doing anything, like, what am I leaving for them? What am I leaving for them? Like, what are they going to think, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? And I've always heard it said that the success of a father is not um how his child turns out while he's in his home, or even after he leaves his home, but it's 10 to 20 years after that. And so I've always kind of wanted to do that. And and because my faith as a Christian, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that's very rooted in family. Family is very central to everything that we do, everything that I do. Just going through the day to day, it's family is very central to it, and it's very central, you know, to my life. I come from, and my current wife is my second wife, and I had a wife prior to that, and there was the possibility that we weren't going to have children, and that was a very, very devastating thing to me. Like, I felt like my future was just uncertain, and as sad as divorce is, I got remarried, and then fatherhood and raising a family was very crucial in my current wife, and we have two wonderful, wonderful boys. They have their challenges like any children do, but I couldn't ask for two better boys.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious because this is actually something that you and I we talk on a fairly regular basis off mic.
Yeah.
This
hmm
is something that we haven't talked about. When did you first find out that you were going to be a father, and that your son was autistic? When did you first find that out?
Okay, so it was very early on in our marriage. I got married in 2017. It was the fall. I think it was the fall of 2018. Actually,
Mm.
I remember. I remember we were because we were talking about having kids. It was just very, like I said, very crucial to everything that we were doing, and we found out that we had children. We were actually watching the season 2 premiere of This Is Us,
Oh.
and in our bedroom, and then my wife took her pregnancy test, and we found out that she wasn't indeed pregnant. We were having a child. Um, Conversely, with that, when we had our second child, I was actually getting ready to like my Avengers Endgame hype was like right here. And and I'm just getting ready to go, and my wife just wraps her arms around me and just sticks a pregnancy test right in front of me. I'm like, how can you do this to me today? She often joked that, like, what if we have the baby while Infinity War is in theaters? And I was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do in that instance. But yeah, we found out then, and for the pregnancy was very high risk because my wife was almost 40 at the time, and so lots of concerns going forward. But luckily, the pregnancy was overall very it's smoother than it might have otherwise been. But my my son Joseph, he was 3 at the time, and we were noticing some things, and like, well, maybe we should have him tested. And we got him tested. We found out he did indeed have autism, and we knew that our lives were going to be different from that, going forward from that. And it has been well, like you mentioned, the day to day that most fathers, most dads go through on a day to day basis is different than what I go through. So yeah, that's the origin story.
Yeah. I'm always interested in origin stories and how things came to be. And you touched on the day to day. That's also something that very much interests me because
Mm-hmm.
my life changed when my son was born. And I think until he moves out, my life is definitely going to be different. It's going to be a different responsibility, different challenges, and different joys, ups and downs. But for
Yeah.
you, I just can you take me through a typical day for you? Maybe a typical good day, a typical bad day. Like what for you are some of the challenges and also the high points of your your dad experience?
Well, it's funny because most fathers, when they have kids, when they first have kids, they're like, oh, I haven't slept in days and months. Um, I haven't had a good night's sleep in about like 6 years.
Man.
um because often what my night consists of is me going to bed, and then I don't know if I am going to stay in that bed during the night. I We have a beanbag in our living room, and that's usually where I sleep. Luckily, my kids' beds are big enough that they can fit me, and that I can and can fit in there. That's like the worst. And then sometimes when they're up all night and we just don't get to sleep at all, that's bad. But a good
Hmm.
day, usually, we usually get up around 5 or 6, get our kids ready to go to school, um, uh, my youngest son has behavioral therapy that he goes to every day, because autistic children, they process the world differently. And what makes my situation unique is I not only have 2 autistic children, I have 2 autistic children that are on 2 ends of the spectrum. My oldest son Joseph is very hyperverbal. He is able to tell me what how he processes things, what he feels, what he's able to, whether that be screaming or in any like meltdowns that he may have, and that's another discussion. And like, and kind of like compartmentalizing those and kind of figuring out how to deal with those when they come, and how to like prepare myself and him for how both of us are going to react, because not only is he neurodivergent, I'm neurodivergent, and I'm diverging all over the place here. uh, but but my youngest, Sammy, he is nonverbal. He does not speak. So if he's not feeling well, if he's angry at something, if he's like not like, if he's like unhappy, he can't tell us, hey, mom, dad, I'm unhappy. Mom, dad, I'm not feeling well. He can't tell us. So we have to interpret through his body language. And luckily, through therapy, he has learned to, through his body language and through his nonverbal skills, to communicate to us what he wants and what he needs. A lot of times he will hand, like if a toy needs batteries, he will hand it to me, and then he will lead my hand over to the drawer where he knows we keep our batteries, and that's basically telling him, dad, I need this fixed. I need to have it have batteries. But then when it's broken and doesn't work anymore, to try to communicate that to him is very difficult, because he doesn't understand, like through his autism, he doesn't understand. He can't verbalize what that means to him. We can't verbalize it to him. It's very difficult in that respect. um uh Joseph is another case altogether. He has a hard time regulating his emotions, and he also suffers something from pathological demand avoidance, which, you, in prior episodes, you guys talked about how, like, I'm showing my kids this and they're loving it. It is very difficult for me to, and I'm the kind of person who loves, when something he loves, he wants to say, hey, here's this thing, I love it, I think you'll love it too. I have to be very careful, because he will then, through his autism and through his PDA, will then um, will then want to not do it just because I suggested it to him. Just because I can't say, hey, Joseph, let's watch Star Wars because it's my favorite movie. He has to be in the mood for it. On Christmas, um, I wanted to watch Muppet Christmas Carol because I love the Muppets, Muppet Family Christmas, but he had to be in the right headspace where like, it has to be already on. It has to be already there. And then it has to be his choice. He has different autonomy limits that he has, and it's often very difficult to kind of figure out where those limits are. And also, a lot of fathers definitely have a problem. I mean, every father has an issue with maintaining their tempers and stuff. And sometimes, we raise our voices, and I have to get on his level, and like, which we should be doing anyway, get on his level and say, Joseph, I'm sorry that I yelled at you. This is why I did it, so he can understand and I can understand. And it's very difficult. And another thing is, like, as I mentioned, my faith, church is a very, very hard thing, because you have to sit still, you have to be quiet. Uh, Sammy has very specific needs in the things that help him regulate. He has to have something that's musical and something that's lights, and it has lights. Well, that's not really conducive to a church environment. And he likes to run around, and that's how he, that's in the autism community, we call it stimming, where they kind of regulate how they're feeling and regulate how and how they can process the world. And how he stims, he likes to run around, he likes to have his toys that make music, that talk, that have lights. Like I said, not very conducive to a church environment, so it's very difficult for us to attend church. Sometimes church can be the longest 2 hours of the week, because we're just like, sometimes we're like, I don't know if we can do this, and we just have to figure out, like, where we're going to take things. Okay, this didn't work, let's try this. and I sometimes in the past, and my wife and I have talked about this many times, is we see other children in church being so, like, not well behaved is a wrong word, but they're able to process things, and they're understanding things. To teach our children these faith topics is very difficult for us, because it's something we've talked about. We want to teach our children how to pray, how to read the Bible, and read all the different scriptures, and it's just hard for us because that has to be on their level, and it makes parenting very difficult, and makes parenting very much a struggle, but very much worth it in so many other regards too.
That is interesting, and I'm wondering, is there anything that you've found? Obviously, you're still growing, you're still evolving
Mm-hmm.
and learning as you go. Have you found certain things that help in your parenting process, things that make the days go by a little faster or a little bit easier for both you and your sons and you, and your wife? Is there any tools or tricks or things that you've found that help you specifically, you
Uh,
personally?
Luckily, a lot of things have come out in the past few years that are helpful to children with these kind of challenges, because there are many things that, like, there are many sensory activities that are
Mm,
at their disposal that weren't at. I mean, I have ADHD, and I think if a lot of the things that are out now were out when I was a child, I think my parents would have had a much easier time
mm,
dealing with me, as I can deal with my children. There are a lot of sensory things, and sometimes it's just hard. Um, like, even with those tools, even with those things at your disposal, you're still kind of learning, you're still kind of growing, and it's very much a challenge. A lot of those things that are there that can help them, there's things like Suberkins, which helps with emotional regulation, which is very specifically targeted for children with trying to regulate these high emotions that neurotypical children will have difficulties. But I think that that's helpful to my children. Um, a lot of tools that we have is, I think with Sammy, with my youngest, is it's a lot of interpretation,
mm,
interpreting his signals, his body signals, and there have been times where I'm going to college for my master's degree, and there was a woman who brought in her child, and her child was about 1.5, and she spoke. This child spoke more eloquently and communicated more eloquently than Sammy has in like almost 5.5 years, and it again made me sad, because I'm thinking about like all the challenges that we have and that he has, and all the developmental delays that he has. It's just it's just very difficult when you see other children who are and parents who are managing it better than you are sometimes.
mm.
And I mean, people deal with that kind of stuff anyway, but it's definitely heightened when you see that all the things that your child is going through, like, people aren't struggling with as much, and so
I can
it
imagine
yeah.
the there's Jim Gaffigan is one of my favorite comedian, or he is my favorite
Mhm.
comedian, I should say,
Yeah.
and he had a joke about just the number of kids that he has, but I think it also kind of applies to this situation where he said, "What is it like having?" I think he has 5 kids, and he's like, "Well, imagine um, being handed a baby and." Now you're drowning, or like just the complications of all of these
Hmm.
things at the same time. And and here's 4 more kids that you have to, on top of the, you were already focused on the one baby, now you have 4 more kids. Have you felt, with having two, has that made it, I guess, how do you cope with that, or how do you handle multiple? Is it time with your wife, splitting between them, or how do you decide who gets the focus of your attention the most?
Um, a lot of times, because with the summertime is because because in the summertime, my wife has to work, but I have had to go to class, and so it's figuring out, like, okay. And when I had a job during the summer, it would be like, okay, we're going to do this and this and this and this on these days and these days and these days and these days, and figuring out, um, and sometimes we just don't even know how one day is going to go. And as a parent, you deal with a huge level of uncertainty. You deal with a huge level of, like, I don't know what this day is going to be, but it's heightened because your child could your child could hit somebody. He could run. You don't know. You just don't know because um you leave a door open, and you often worry about your child running off anyway. But there was a time when I accidentally left the door open, and because things are going on so fast and things are happening fast and frequent, I leave the door open as my wife's getting home, and Sammy's like taking off down the sidewalk, and he doesn't have any, he because of his autism, he doesn't have any cognizance of this is bad, like
Hmm.
this is dangerous. And as a father, you're just like, did I just endanger my child's life? And like, am I providing my child with a safe environment that they feel safe in? um a Sometimes Joseph will be in his fight or flight mode with his demand avoidance, that he'll sometimes hit me, and I have to also often explain, okay, we do not do that. And like, when his emotions are high, and sometimes my emotions will get high, and and meeting at that middle part is difficult. Sometimes I have I have most parents don't learn to deal with this until their kids is 12 or 13. When Joseph was 4, he told me he hated me and that I was the worst dad ever, and that he wanted me to sleep outside.
Ah.
And obviously, when you first hear that, you're like, oh my gosh, I am a terrible parent and I'm the worst. But then when it happens more frequently, you unfortunately learn to live with it and learn to deal with it. Like, this is just a phase he's doing. Because then the next day he'll say, I love dad. And just like, okay, like, this is the up and down we're dealing with here. But yeah, but definitely multiple is definitely tough. Two kids with autism, I would not, I mean, I know people who have like at least one, and having normal neurotypical children helps to balance that out. But we have two children who have autism, who have difficulties, and a lot of times they'll want me and a lot of times they won't. And it's learning to deal with that. And sometimes me and my wife, we have to figure out, okay, who is going to take, like, finding babysitters is difficult because a lot of because normal with kids at this age, you could, like, okay, well, there's a teenager who lives down the street, lives across the street from us, who could watch them. But with my children, it's very difficult. We have to find a babysitter who, one, we're familiar with, and two, the child is emotionally familiar with and feels safe with. We can't just, like, okay, like, this person's gonna to watch them, they'll be fine. And things you see on sitcoms, like, the babysitters, like, basically the worst it gets. But we have to figure out, you know um like, who is going to watch our kids while we do something, because my wife and I need our time too. We need our time, to build our relationship as a couple. And sometimes we're only able to do that when we're both not working or doing anything, and both kids are away, because that's just the time we're able to find, and that's a difficulty. But as far as joys go, because I do want to talk about the good stuff, because there are good things. There are good things. um I have texted you off and on all the things that my oldest son says, because he's very hyperverbal. He has a mouth on him, and like my wife has a note in her phone of all the things that Joseph says, so she can remember them and so she can catalog them. Um, he is very gifted in a lot of different ways. He has a lot of strengths. He contemplates and contemplates and calculates things way faster than I ever have or ever will. And that is a really, really cool thing to witness. Is One time he told me that because he saw in a video, because he watches a lot of YouTube Kids, uh, and and he said, Daddy, you shouldn't pee standing up. It's more safer for you to do it sitting down. I'm like, okay, where did you see this? Like on YouTube Kids, and
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
oh, okay, yeah. And the fact that he's like absorbing all this information, all these things that he's learning, he's learning. He builds Legos. He wants to make a stop motion video for a film festival. Who does that at age 6? It's just wonderful to see his gifts and the way he processes the world and the way he feels about things, to see it kind of, to see it come to bear. And there are many good things. There are challenges for sure. There are challenges for sure. I don't know if I have to take him home, and because I don't drive a car, and so I will then have to take him home. I don't know how that bus ride is going to go. I don't know if he's going to be screaming, if he's going to, like, I want off the bus. I want to go home. I don't want to be here. Or if he's just going to be happily, playing with his iPad and or something. I don't know how that's going to go. I don't know if, like, how things are going to go with my night, if I'm going to sleep that night or not. And so I have to prepare for that. I can't do the things that I would want to do when kids are asleep. Like, I can't. I We record a podcast about Star Wars, and um like, there are times when I'm able to watch the new episode of Skeleton Crew that night. But if I want to sleep that night, I'm not going to watch the new episode of Skeleton Crew. It has to wait till the morning. And so trying to prioritize, like, what things are the most what are the priorities. Um uh and also, this it helps me, like, another thing it helps me with, like, being a parent of two autistic children. It helps to me to recognize these things in other people's children. Like, you've told me about things that your son Ezra does, and I'm like, that seems very neurodivergent coded and feels very like something that should be watched and monitored. And we see other kids who, maybe the parents are too proud, maybe they don't have the resources to look into these things that we have had, and to look into those things. um but we see, like, yeah, this child has some form of autism. I don't know what form it is, but it's some form.
Hmm.
Another uncertainty is, talking about things that we do and that we want to do with our kids. I'm a big fan of the movies. I love movies. I love movies. I love TV. Um, to kind of figure out, like, hey, is this movie going to be something um, that uh, that my son is going to want to watch? Like, we went and saw Mufasa, and he got bored halfway through. And most parents would say, "Well, we paid for the ticket. Let's do it." I'm not patting myself on the back or anything, but at all. But, like, if he doesn't want to be there, it's obvious, because he's walking up and down the steps of the theater we're in, and so, like, okay, like, obviously this isn't this is not something he's responding to. Um, but um, but also, we have to also I also have to be very careful that if we're seeing a movie that I'm not necessarily into, um, like Moana 2, um, because Joseph saw Moana 2 with my wife, and she said it was okay, and I've been hearing all these things about it, and my wife had to remind me, like, okay, if you don't like it, don't act like you don't like it. Don't act like you don't like it, because autistic children, they definitely pick up on things faster. Their emotional sensitivity is way up there, than and it definitely helps, um to like to be in tune with those emotions, and it heightens your emotions, it heightens theirs. Meltdowns is something that autistic parents of autistic children deal with, because so often, people will say they see a child uh yelling in the grocery store, and they're like, why can't they be better parents? And 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 sometimes with a meltdown, and I've had conversations with family members, like, why are you letting him get what he wants? And it's like, it's not letting him get what he wants. It's a lot of times that's the way to circumvent the meltdown and circumvent, more escalation, is to, you're like, okay, here's this, and then that helps them to calm down and be emotionally regulated again. And a lot of this regulation is very hard to deal with as a parent, when like, society is telling you like, a child shouldn't do this, or a child shouldn't do that, and it's just about, or it's like, people shouldn't do this. A lot of times, you shouldn't stand in the theater, you shouldn't walk around in the theater, you shouldn't talk in the theater. This is all about a society that was not built for neurodivergent individuals, and it's kind of, we have to reframe how we view society and how we view how people act. And because we're being respectful of all different kinds of people, different races, different gender orientations, mental capacity is something that we are still working on and still need to find room for.
Excellent. Well, Tim, your journey as a father is inspiring, and we're so grateful that you could be here to shed light on such an important topic. To our listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you take away from today's discussion with Super Tim? Drop us a comment or send us your feedback. We want to keep this conversation going in the comment section on YouTube. And while you're at it, don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. That way, you can always get new notifications that we are putting out new episodes, and we're trying to continue this fatherhood journey and learn as we go, and also kind of share our experiences as we continue to be dads to the future. But we'd like to thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next time, because where we're going, we don't need roads.